I think, just as a recap, because I haven't made a video for a while, I want to first talk about the hospitals. I think the UN has a way of creating, the way they do things, they fund things and they help things, and it's from the Rockefeller era. David Rockefeller, may God have mercy on him. He had a system in place. Remember, these guys were the American industrial elites. It was a new breed of people, and their job was to try and take over the world. They were colonizing the world the same way Britain had, but they did it in such a way where there was this new, what was happening at home, it's like the Roman Empire. What was happening at home was also going to impact the empire. And one of those things was human rights. So the Rockefellers, they changed also. Everyone changes generation by generation, even though legacy wealthy people tend to inherit everything down to the bone the same way as their parents, but they still change because they're human beings. They're not, they have a permeability to change, because everything, we have to remember, when we say radical or conservative, conservation, we're trying to conserve something from the past, but everything is in constant change all the time. It's science. So Rockefeller, these institutions, they came about with a very good mission, but the problem was the way they funded some of these undertakings. They ended up being run like rackets. So for example, Gaza and Hamas and the PA, when they started getting money and help, and when every time they go to war, they would say, well, they can't bomb hospitals, they can't bomb ambulances. Even in Syria, you remember, oh my God, they bombed an ambulance, and they kept focusing on that because the media itself went where the action was, and the action was around these things because the Arabs were like, they aerial bombard everything. They have air superiority, and the only thing we can do is hide in tunnels and be underground. So a lot of times, I think the Gazans, especially Hamas, when it became a government, one time elected forever and ever, it ended up being underground, that they used hospitals as shelter. They were like, where are we going to fight? Where are we going to fight from? We can't make bases. They're going to bomb them. We can't, they use houses, they use villas, they use all kinds of places, but they use hospitals. So that's one of the things I wanted to talk about. The other thing I want to talk about is why Iran and Hezbollah are not directly as a unit choosing to get into this escalation, is because, number one, they don't agree with the way. And I think Jews understand this too. If you read the Bible and if you look at things, and historically, even what might have happened between one Hindu tribe against another 4,000 years ago, if you really find the evidence, you'll find sometimes the oppressor just straight out wins by obliterating its enemy. But a lot of times, especially if you're fighting on moral ground, even when there was Catholics fighting Catholics, and the guy would come and put holy water and bless both sides and say, go ahead and fight and let's see who wins. And that's the epitome of moral fighting. This was wrong. You can't, two wrongs don't make a right. So that's one reason the Shiites are staying out of this, because they think it was really uncalled for. It was just way out of this. Like, it was way out of left field, and they don't know why they did it. Another thing is, Shiites have the sentiment that the Sunnis, even when they need us, there's this deep desire for them to never see Shiites have anything, because remember, there's a group of people that are haves, and then there's an underclass and the underdog, and the Shiites have always had to be underdogs. And when they finally got BRICS, 2 weeks later, Hamas does this. And the leader of Hezbollah, Nasrallah, said, like, it's secrecy, we're impressed by the secrecy, that they didn't run it by any of us. We usually get, and that also tells us, that means they're in the loop. Oftentimes, they're in the loop. They trust each other enough to be in the loop. Of course, Hamas has been backed strongly. I think Hamas has new backers today, like Egypt, perhaps their intel, maybe Brotherhood, the MB, the Muslim Brotherhood, or perhaps even bigger than that. But that's the Shiite stance on all this, that I think they're feeling, well, we would like to continue with BRICS. We want to be legitimate citizens of the world, and they talk about that all the time. about how they want technology, they like progress, but they won't compromise on how they treat women, because that's just somehow a natural religion, and Islam tells us how to treat women, and it's not exactly the way that they want it to go, and so on. But those are the things. So I discussed two things. I discussed, number one, why there's no escalation desired on the Shiite side. As a Shiite, I'm saying this. And also, I discussed, I don't even remember anymore because my mind just threw a blank. And that's the problem. There we go. There's always, it's one of these things. It's the two things that I discussed. That, and oh, the other thing, the hospitals. I started with the hospitals. With the hospitals, you know, it's happening right now. Within the next hour or two, we're going to have the hospital thing figured out. And Israel will be able to prove that they were right. And then there's that whole thing, are they faking it? You know, they showed already one place under a hospital, in a small hospital. And they're going to be able to find that too. I'm pretty sure there's no other way, as a matter of fact, that Hamas could have, you know, hid all this stuff and prevented it from being attacked. And I think Al-Shifa is probably a base, and I think what we're going to find is that it's going to be actually a much more elaborate base. You're going to see that something more elaborate than the one they found. They're not quite there yet. They're around it, they're close to it, but they haven't taken over the entire building. They didn't take the fuel, which is one sign. They let babies die instead of taking that fuel. It could be, again, number one, just simple, you know, uncalculated Arab pride, or it could be that they're quickly cleaning up the house before the soldiers show up. But we're going to find out soon, and I think those are the two things I wanted to talk about.